Well, hello everyone. Right now we're going to give you a brief tutorial on how to complete the Formative Assessment Plan assignment. So you'd start by reviewing the objectives, why this matters, and then go right to the directions here where we make a copy of the template for ourselves to work on. So we'll go to File, and then make a copy, make sure it's in our drive. Make sure that our share settings are set to what the instructor has asked you to do. And that's typically anyone on the internet can view. Okay. And then from there, what we're going to do is we have to identify two different learning goals based on content standards in our content area. So we can go to our content standards and find some that we have not yet tackled and then develop a learning goal from those. Or we can pull from learning goals we've already developed in a previous assignment. So let's say, for example, I come up with this learning goal. I want my students to make inferences from the text and support them with strong and thorough textual evidence. That would be one learning goal that I would put up here and develop a formative assessment plan for. Then I could have another learning goal that I'd put in the second one down here, such as I want my students to be able to explain what textual evidence and inferences are. Okay, so I've got my two different learning goals, and those can be from past assignments or based on new standards that I want to tackle. And then from there, I'm going to develop a very robust formative assessment plan. In other words, I need to figure out how I can collect evidence of students' ability to do this at the start of the lesson, at the middle of the lesson, and at the end of the lesson. Okay, and I'm going to come up with an idea for the beginning, middle, and end, and describe that in detail twice. Okay, I'm going to do it for this learning goal right here, all the way across, beginning, middle, and end strategies, a different strat in each one. And then I'm going to say, well, what would be another way I could collect evidence for that same learning goal at the beginning, middle, and end of the lesson? Now, since we're still learning about formative assessment, there are formative assessment ideas linked right here. So let's say I'm on the hunt for something I can use at the end of the lesson to collect evidence from my students. And I click on this right here and go. And at Edutopia, I find this idea that has to do with different ways to do formative assessment. And in there, I find a strategy that talks about exit tickets. Sure enough, that seems to be a good fit for the end of the lesson. So I come up with exit slips, and that's what I'm going to put into the assignment right here. Let's see, is that a good fit for this learning goal? Yes, I could do exit slips. And then I describe that using questions at the end of a lesson to do a brief data collection activity at the end of a lesson. I already said in the lesson, didn't I? And check on students' abilities. Understand. Okay, so I'm going to describe that. Now I need to go through and articulate how I'm going to use that to gather evidence of individual students' learning. After I write up that description, I identify how will I use it to provide feedback to my students. And then how will I use it to make adjustment? So I'm identifying what strategy I'll use at the beginning, middle, and end of the lesson, but also explaining exactly how I'll use that to gather evidence, provide feedback to my students, and make adjustments. So I'll do a strategy for the beginning, middle, and end, and then I'll go back through and try it again. What is another strategy I can use at the beginning, the middle, and the end? So I see for each learning goal, we'll have a strategy here, 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 and here. 6 different strategies that the teacher will use. Okay, now after I cover the teacher part, I go down here and I say, okay, this is asking now for self or peer assessment strategies that I can use in that lesson. I'm still thinking about this learning goal. I want my students to be able to make inferences from the text and support them with strong and thorough textual evidence. That's the one that I've decided to do. But now I'm on the hunt not for teacher-provided strategies, but self-assessment or peer assessment strategies. So I'd go back up to my resources and look through these lists and try and find some that deal more with self-assessment or with peer assessment. And if I open that up, I look through and I find one that says, okay, this is for self-assessment. This is a thumb gauge strategy or a quick reflection. So I go back to my plan. Now I could use this one based on the description at the middle or the end. It's a it's a self-assessment strategy. So I put it in right there, thumb gauge. This is a quick self-reflection. And then I'm going to describe how I'm going to use it to gather evidence, how it will be used to provide feedback to students, and how I will use that self-assessment strategy that students engage in to make adjustments to my instruction. So these strategies, a strategy for the beginning, middle, end of the lesson, and another one for the beginning, middle, and the end of the lesson, need to be self or peer assessment strategies, whereas the ones up here were based on teacher-provided strategies. Okay, so I've done that for one of my learning goals. I'll fill out the entire chart. Then I'll go down to the second learning goal and repeat the process. Go back to my resources and find 3 different strategies, one for the start, the middle, the end of the lesson, and explain those. Come up with another plan, start, middle, end of the lesson, explain those, and then find, for that learning goal, self or peer assessment strategies for the start, middle, end of the lesson, describe those, and then do it again. Okay? So the idea is to come up with a very robust formative assessment plan for 2 different learning goals. And that's how you complete that assignment.